Caitlin Clark could have just complained. Instead, after her sixth technical foul of the season and a $1,000 fine on Saturday, she spent months asking the WNBA for something bigger: full-time referees. That request only makes sense once you know the backstory. A disputed technical in June that never got overturned, a fan base that's been counting every whistle since, and a suspension threshold that's now just 2 technicals away. All of it landed one day after she scored 45 points and joined one of the rarest clubs in basketball history. Let's talk about what Clark is actually asking for and why fans think the league owes her an answer. From history to controversy, start with the timeline because the timeline is the entire story. On a Friday night in Indianapolis, Caitlin Clark did something nobody in professional basketball history had quite done before. 45 points, 10 assists, 4 steals, 2 blocks, a stat line so rare that only 4 other names in basketball history, men's or women's, had ever produced it. She did it in under 30 minutes, still working under a minute's restriction her own coaching staff has not lifted. Fans stayed up replaying the highlights. Analysts spent the next morning comparing her to Michael Jordan and Luka Doncic. For one night, every conversation about Caitlin Clark was about what she had just done on the floor and nothing else. Then came Saturday. 90 seconds into the Fever's game against the New York Liberty, Clark ran into a hard screen set by Liberty center Jonquel Jones. She went down to the floor and looked for a foul call that never came. She got up frustrated, said something to the nearest official, and was hit with a technical foul on the spot, her 6th of the season. How does a league go from celebrating a historic individual performance one night to finding that same player before she has even settled into her next game? Under the WNBA's updated fine structure for this season, that technical came with a $1,000 price tag. And it did more than cost Clark money. It moved her to within 2 technical fouls of an automatic 1-game suspension, tied with Kalia Copper for the second most in the league, behind only Angel Reese. What does it say about the margin this league is working with that its most watched player is 2 whistles from a forced night off? The Fever still won the game, 108-88, with Kelsey Mitchell pouring in 33 points to carry the offense. But the win almost became a footnote to the technical itself, because for a fan base that had spent the previous night celebrating history, the fine felt like something else entirely. What makes the timing sting is not just the proximity of the 2 nights. It is the contrast between them. One night, Clark was doing something 4 legends of the sport had done, and nobody else. The next, she was one bad whistle away from a suspension that could sideline the same player the league had just watched make history. Is there a version of this sport where a superstar's discipline record and her record book entries can exist in the same week without one overshadowing the other? For Fever fans, that question has been building for a while, and this was the moment it boiled over again. Look at how quickly the mood shifted across social media that weekend. Saturday morning, timelines were full of slow-motion replays of Clark's step-back threes and clips of her fourth-quarter free throws. By Saturday night, those same timelines were filled with screenshots of the technical foul report, and fans doing the math on how many more fouls stood between Clark and a forced night off. How does a fan base go from celebrating history to counting down a suspension clock in the span of 24 hours? That is not a coincidence of bad luck. It is a pattern fans have been tracking build by build, technical by technical, for most of the season. And the fine on July 18th was simply the latest data point in a growing file. Consider what the Fever actually got out of Clark that Saturday, despite the rocky start. She played through the frustration, ran the offense, and helped close out a 20-point road-tested win over a Liberty team that had beaten Indiana earlier this season. None of that showed up in the headlines the way the technical did. Why does one 90-second sequence in the first quarter end up defining the coverage of a game Indiana actually controlled for most of the night? That imbalance, more than the fine itself, is what has fans the most frustrated. Not that Clark got a technical, but that the technical became the story instead of the win it happened inside of. When fans started questioning to understand why fans reacted the way they did on July 18th, you have to go back to June. Clark picked up a technical foul against the Phoenix Mercury that many fans and analysts felt was borderline at best. The kind of call that gets waved off for most players, but somehow stuck for her. The league reviewed it. Rather than rescind the call, the way it had done for other players earlier in the season, the WNBA upheld it. That decision is what actually lit the fuse months before the 6th technical against New York ever happened. Fans did not stay quiet about it. Across social media, the reaction was immediate and pointed. Comments accusing the league of holding Clark to a different standard than everyone else on the floor. Comments comparing her technical foul history to players with similar or rougher on-court conduct who never seem to draw the same scrutiny. Why does a call that gets rescinded for one player stand for another in the exact same season? That question has followed Clark's technical fouls ever since, and it is the real reason the sixth technical in July did not feel like an isolated incident to the people watching it happen. Head coach Stephanie White has addressed the pattern directly, telling reporters after an earlier technical that there need to be conversations about being more strategic with how those fouls get used against her own team. That is a coach, not a fan account, acknowledging in public that Clark's relationship with WNBA officiating has become something the organization has to actively manage. When a team's own coaching staff is choosing its words carefully around a pattern like this, what does that tell the rest of the league about how visible the issue has become? None of this exists in a vacuum. Clark is currently tied for second in the league in technical fouls, sitting behind only Angel Reese and even with Kalani Brown and Copper, two players whose games look nothing alike, which makes the shared number harder to explain away as simple coincidence. What are the odds that two guards with such different styles of play end up in the exact same disciplinary bracket by accident? Every additional technical adds to a running tally that fans have been keeping since spring. Screenshot by screenshot, box score by box score. And every new entry gets read through the lens of everything that came before it. That is what makes this moment different from an isolated bad call. A single disputed technical is a bad night. A pattern across an entire season, defended in interviews by a head coach, and tracked obsessively by a fan base that refuses to let it go unnoticed, is something closer to an ongoing negotiation between a team and a league office. Is the WNBA actually listening to that pressure, or is it simply absorbing it one fine at a time? Fans have not gotten a clear answer yet. And that uncertainty is exactly why every new technical gets treated as the latest chapter instead of a standalone event. There is also a financial layer to this that fans have started paying closer attention to. Under the league's new fine structure this season, technicals 4 through 7 each carry a $1,000 penalty, a steep jump from the $200 starting point of previous seasons. Should the cost of frustration really climb this fast while the consistency of the calls causing it stays exactly where it was? Supporters have pointed out that raising the cost of frustration without addressing the consistency of the calls that cause it puts the burden entirely on the player, not on the officiating. Clark has continued speaking publicly about the need for full-time officials in the league. A structural change she and plenty of others believe would reduce exactly this kind of inconsistency from game to game. That single ask, full-time referees instead of part-time ones, has become something of a rallying point for the fan base this season. It reframes the conversation away from any one disputed call and toward the system that produces them. If the inconsistency fans keep pointing to is really a staffing and structural issue, rather than a conspiracy against one player, does fixing it become a league priority once its biggest star is the one publicly asking for the fix? 2 technicals from suspension. 2 technical fouls. That is the entire distance separating Caitlin Clark from a mandatory 1-game suspension right now. And the math behind that number deserves more attention than it usually gets. Under the WNBA's rules, an 8th technical foul in a regular season triggers an automatic suspension. No review, no appeal process that changes the outcome. Just a $1,500 fine and a forced night on the bench. For most players, that distance would be an afterthought. For the player the entire league is currently built around, it is a genuine crisis waiting to happen. Consider what an actual suspension would mean beyond the standings. Indiana currently sits at 15 wins and 10 losses, fighting for playoff positioning in a conference that has gotten tighter by the week. Clark is averaging close to 21 points, nearly 8 assists, and 4 rebounds a night. Numbers that anchor almost everything the Fever run on offense. Take her out for even one game, and how does an offense built around her gravity and her passing simply reroute itself on 48 hours' notice? That is not a hypothetical anymore. It is 2 bad whistles away from being next week's headline. There is also the matter of who else is affected. A Clark suspension does not just cost Indiana a player, it costs broadcasters an audience. It costs the road team a sellout crowd. And it costs the league the exact kind of mainstream attention it has spent the past 2 seasons trying to capture. Every arena Clark visits sells out in ways most WNBA games never have. If the league's biggest driver of ticket sales and television ratings is sitting 2 technicals from a forced absence, whose interest does that outcome actually serve? Clark herself has been candid about the frustration of playing that close to the edge. She has openly wondered aloud about needing to circle a potential suspension date on the calendar. A joke that carries a real edge given how often the fouls have piled up this season. Fans have picked up on that tension immediately, because it means every single technical from here forward gets treated like a countdown clock instead of a routine part of a physical, emotional sport. How many players in any professional league get asked to manage their emotions this publicly with this much riding on every whistle? None of this suggests Clark should get a pass on legitimate technical fouls. Nobody is arguing that. What fans are arguing is that the margin for error has become razor-thin at exactly the moment her play has never been better. Is it reasonable to ask any player, let alone the league's most scrutinized one, to play with that little room for a bad whistle? That combination, historic performance paired with suspension math this tight, is what makes the current stretch of the season feel so precarious for everyone wearing a Fever jersey. Look at how the rest of the roster has had to adjust around this reality. Backup guards who might see spot minutes in a blowout suddenly become the subject of hypothetical suspension game lineups on message boards and group chats. Coaches around the league are almost certainly building contingency plans of their own because facing a Fever team without Clark is a fundamentally different defensive assignment. Clark's own response has been notably measured given the stakes. Rather than venting, she has repeatedly steered the conversation toward a structural fix. Full-time officiating crews instead of the part-time system the league relies on now. Why would that argument matter more to her than simply asking for leniency on her own calls? It is not a complaint about one call. It is an argument that inconsistency is a staffing problem before it is a conspiracy. National sports media has noticed, too, with commentators describing what one prominent voice called a kind of political tug-of-war around Clark's treatment. Praised as the league's biggest draw one week, disciplined more visibly than her peers the next. Once a debate spreads past WNBA-specific coverage, does the league still control the narrative or has it already lost that control to the conversation itself? That framing has pulled casual fans into asking whether its most marketable player is being managed fairly. Coach Stephanie White occupies an unusual middle position, acknowledging publicly that her staff needs conversations with Clark about being strategic on the floor. Coach speak for managing a problem without criticizing the officiating that creates it. When a head coach has to thread that needle in post-game interviews, what does it say about how delicate this has become inside the organization itself? Meanwhile, the fan base has not waited on anyone to resolve it. Every technical gets its own wave of commentary and screenshots within minutes. What does it mean for a league office when its fans have effectively become their own fact-checking department? That real-time organized attention is its own form of pressure, even without a formal campaign, a fan base refusing to let any single call disappear quietly, insisting everyone gets counted and discussed as part of the pattern everyone has watched build since June. What separates this case is the timing. Clark's technicals are not landing in quiet stretches. They are arriving the same week as record-breaking box scores, the same month playoff races tighten, at the exact moment casual fans are paying closer attention to women's basketball than ever. Does that timing make the league more careful with her discipline, or does it just raise the stakes on every call either way? Whatever the answer turns out to be, one thing is already clear. The fan base is not going away. The media attention is not slowing down. And Clark has shown no sign of softening her public stance. Can a league keep absorbing pressure from three directions, supporters, commentators, the player herself, without eventually having to respond to it directly? How it answers in the coming weeks will likely shape the conversation for the rest of the season. The suspension countdown. So, what actually happens if the 8th technical arrives? Strip away the speculation, and the mechanics are simple. The moment Clark picks up her 8th technical foul of the regular season, the WNBA automatically suspends her for one game, no hearing, no appeal that changes the outcome, along with a $1,500 fine on top of it. For a team fighting for playoff seeding in a tightening conference race, losing its most productive player for even one night is not an inconvenience. It is the kind of absence that can shift a single game in the standings, and in a season this close, single games matter. How many playoff races have been decided by one missing game from one missing star? Look at what Indiana's schedule looks like over the next stretch. Every remaining game carries playoff weight. Every possession matters against teams separated by only a game or two in the standings. And every one of those games assumes Clark is on the floor running the offense. Is a single game suspension really a small price for the league to risk paying in the middle of a playoff race this tight? Remove her for a night and the Fever are relying on a rotation that has never had to carry this much offensive responsibility without her. What would Indiana's offense actually look like on a night it has to run entirely through Kelsey Mitchell and the rest of the roster instead of splitting the load with Clark? There is also a broader consequence that extends past any single game. Every Clark appearance this season has come with elevated attendance, elevated television ratings, and a level of national attention the league has openly credited her with generating. A suspension does not just cost Indiana a player for a night. It costs the league one of its most reliable draws on a night that might otherwise have set another attendance or ratings mark. Is the WNBA actually prepared for what a suspended night looks like in terms of the audience it would lose along with her? Fans have started treating every technical from here forward as its own mini-drama, refreshing box scores in real time during fever games specifically to see whether Clark has picked up a foul that pushes her closer to the threshold. That kind of attention is exhausting for everyone involved, including Clark herself, who has to manage her competitiveness and her frustration under a level of scrutiny very few athletes in any sport ever have to deal with on a play-by-play basis. How long can a player reasonably be expected to play with that kind of countdown clock following her into every single game? None of this has a clean resolution yet. The technicals could stop tomorrow. The league could revisit its disciplinary structure, or the 8th foul could arrive in the next 2 weeks. Which of those outcomes actually feels most likely given how this season has gone so far? What is certain is that fans are not looking away. The pressure on the league office is not letting up, and every whistle from here through the rest of the season is going to be read as part of a story that started well before July 18th, and shows no sign of resolving itself quietly. Consider too how this stretch of the season compares to everything Clark has already overcome to get here. This is a player who has dealt with recurring injury concerns, a minutes restriction her own coaching staff has managed carefully all year, and a level of physical contact from opponents that has been documented and debated since her rookie season. Layering a suspension threat on top of all of that turns what should be a celebratory stretch coming off a historic scoring night into something considerably more tense. Does it seem reasonable that a player already managing this much physically should also be managing a suspension countdown at the same time? For now, the countdown simply continues. 2 more technicals, and the conversation shifts from hypothetical to real. Until then, every Fever broadcast carries an undercurrent that did not exist a season ago. Fans watching Clark's box score the way they would watch a scoreboard in the final minute of a close game, aware that one more whistle changes everything about the next game Indiana plays. 2 more technicals and this stops being a hypothetical. Everything covered here, the fine, the June call that never got overturned, the full-time referees Clark keeps asking for, points to one question. Does the WNBA plan to answer her? Or just keep cashing the fines? Fans have counted every whistle since spring and they are not stopping. This is bigger than a technical foul. It is a test of whether the league fixes what its own biggest star keeps pointing at. Do you think the WNBA owes Clark an answer? Say so in the comments. Like this video for more and subscribe to Hoops Uncovered so you don't miss what's next.